Hey, y'all.
Hello, hello. Welcome back to Nightshift with Andrea up late. I'm joined as always by my trusty co-host Brian Sanders. How you doing, Brian?
Wonderful.
Good. Good. I see the chats are already active because as always I'm fashionably late to my
As
own
you
show.
should be. You're actually not late. You start the show, so
I'm late for when I schedule it on YouTube. So if you guys are new here, Night Shift is a true crime podcast, and we air first live on YouTube on the Andrea Up Late channel, and then drop to streaming wherever you may listen to your audio podcast. Sometime in the next day or two after we go live. So welcome everybody in the chats. We always kind of engage with the chats a little bit at the beginning, but definitely at the end of the show. So if you're new here, please just log into YouTube with your email. It's free. We refuse to make a penny on this podcast, or just haven't had the chance to. And so it's free to do it. Hop in and chat with us, ask us questions, banter with our friends in the chats. We always enjoy seeing your names and hearing what you have to say. So, how have you been? How's your week been?
it's been good.
Yeah.
I've actually been pretty busy building out a class.
You want to talk about it?
I can just tell you, it's called Building the Machine.
Okay.
And it's just basically how departments can build up culture to be proactive, gain intel, how
Okay.
to design proactive units, how to develop sources in neighborhoods, how to
Cool.
give briefings, all that stuff.
So what he's talking about is going to be for a different platform that he'll talk about once that kind of gets rolling. But in the meantime, we'll talk about it at the end of the show. But you can always go to his website and look at any classes that are available to law enforcement or civilians. And he has different chunks, so you can get like different varieties of times and online courses and whatnot. So, or we always ask everybody to come to Wilmington, visit us here, and you can take an in-person class with them.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, the case that we are covering takes place in 2018. We haven't really covered something quite so current in a while. While I'm speaking on that, I will put some stuff on Instagram. But as we speak today, there have been a few new developments in the Asha Degree case. If you remember, that case ran cold for years and years and years. Asha was a 9-year-old little girl out of Shelby, North Carolina, that went missing in the midst of a million bizarre events and a rainstorm and sleepwalking or not, or a hit and run or not. And then for months later, her backpack to have been found quite a ways away in a neighboring county, double bagged in a trash bag, buried under the ground, still nothing. We have an unidentified photo of a little girl. We've got remnants from things that Asha, that belonged to Asha in a home or land adjacent to her home. Just one thing after another was always bizarre. It's one that I think people had started to say, I'm just terrified that, nothing will ever come of that case. And if you remember, a few months ago, we did an update. There was a massive search warrant. We got note of it. I called that county's jurisdiction that morning. It's calling Brian, and everybody was abuzz. And sure enough, it was true. And they were conducting an extensive search warrant of this Deadman, this guy's last name, this family's property there in the county where little Asha went missing. And there they unearthed a car that kind of chilled everyone to the bone, because in the original investigation, there was a green car that had been described as like a late 70s model. Of course, this was back in the earlier 2000s, so that would have stood out. This emerald green car. And that's one of the things they uncovered in this original search a few months ago, which at that time was the biggest any development to have happened in all those years. And as of today, a new search warrant has gone out. They've obtained more technology, if you will, and text messages have been revealed between at the time, the teenage sisters of that family, the Deadman family. And we're talking about, it looks like they might be implicated in a potential, like, accidentally a part of her death, if you will.
Oh.
And that they now, currently speaking, their current text messages as adults, they're kind of freaking out, which it could be really sad if they were kids at the time and something happened and their family took place in covering something up. So anyway, it's wild. We'll keep you posted. It's insane. So we are going to go on and get started. Brian, do you have pop culture for the year of 2018?
Yeah, and the sad thing is,
I don't feel like there's a lot.
I've got like one little sheet of paper.
Yeah.
Usually I've got like all kinds of stuff. I pick and choose.
Yeah, I don't feel like that's so raging year of anything cool.
No, and also, I think 2018 will look kind of like some of the maybe late 70s looked when we were kids at first, or whatever, like
meh,
kind of bland. But when I tried to pull songs up, I didn't really know any of them except Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga.
Oh, Shallow. Yeah, that's a good one.
Which is from the movie A Star Is Born.
Oh, which is old. And then remade.
Yeah, and then they remade it. And so it seems to be one of the decent movies of 2018.
Nice.
And then there was a White Boy Rick movie made in 2018.
Oh, we might need to recover that case.
Yes.
I reached out to him when we covered. So the White Boy Rick, it's Rick Wershey, I believe is his last name, right? And that's actually super interesting. That kind of ties in like some FBI with some drug, with some gang, like all kinds of stuff. And he was known as White Boy Rick because at the time, this was during what wasn't like crack and everything else going on. And as a child, I won't even get into it. It doesn't matter. His dad was into a bunch of stuff. He, as a kid, kind of gets into some stuff, and then he's able to be kind of flipped, used as an informant. And it doesn't really go the way it should have gone for him, in my mind, for him to have been the age he was and being paid by the government. And then for everybody to be like, oh, wait, never mind. Hands off of you now. Reached out to him at the time we covered the case originally. He was very gracious, but he's kind of on to doing other things. I think he's kind of got some like filming and some things in the works about his life, which he should. He absolutely should. So
that was the year that a lot of people were just saying that was the last normal year before TikTok took over.
Oh gosh, is that when that is that when that happened?
I guess by like 2019, it was pretty mainstream with a lot of users. So
I wasn't there yet.
Yeah, I'm still not there, but that's what it's kind of giving credit to.
Okay.
Television would have been Jack Ryan was a big hit that year, and then Castle Rock. There's a series based on Stephen King characters and novels. Kind of weaves them in and out. And that's really about it. Trump was in his, I think, second year as president.
Yeah. Yep.
So a little bit of history with him being elected or reelected or however you want to call it.
Gotcha.
Yep. But that's it. I could not find anything that was kind of obscure or interesting or that people would reflect and be real nostalgic about.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm not there for 2018. In saying that, Silly's in the chats, and she said that he's local. So Silly's up there in that Bart Simpson state of Michigan, and he's local there. And then we've got Abby in the chat saying that she can hear the train. There's a train going wild outside right now. That's the best part. Yeah. All right. Well, without further ado, I don't know. This case is kind of interesting. This is one that by the end of it, I feel pretty certain on what happened. There has been a conviction. So unlike a lot of our cases, it's not unresolved. But there are Facebook pages, Reddit threads, a lot of people dedicated to actually trying to stand for the convicted's innocence. And we'll see what you think about that. I'm not sure how they get there, but let's figure it out. So we're going to start out a little bit talking about farming and agriculture. So when it comes to one of the more hazardous jobs, how would you rank farming and agriculture industry in terms of like fatalities or being hazardous in America specifically?
I would probably say number 2.
Yeah, it alternates, but it's absolutely consistently one of the highest ranking, most hazardous jobs. So we've got it accounting for a lot, like most of the deaths per profession in America. So for instance, in 2022, fatalities in farming and agriculture account for approximately 23 per 100,000. So that's a pretty hefty number, actually.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to start it there, and let's get into the actual meat of the case here. So we have Todd and Amy Mullis. That's who we're going to be talking about, Mullis. So Todd and Amy Mullis owned farm property in Delaware County, Iowa. So that's where our case is taking place today. Todd was very passionate about farming. So this is something that he loved to do. He had been doing since he was a child. He worked very hard at it, and he was really pretty proficient at it. And their life's blood was made off of farming, and mainly animals. Hog farming was one of his bigger endeavors, if you will. So he purchased his first farm in 1999, and eventually he grew to 3 different farms. And part of even another one, part of a fourth. So his farm included 2 hog barns on his home place. He met Amy in 2003 at the Delaware County Fair, and they got married in 2004, September, I believe, 2004. Following the marriage, Amy moved into Todd's farm, and Amy worked off the farm here and there, and then she wound up going on to her job as a registered nurse in the emergency room. Eventually, they had 3 children. You know what? Never mind. Somebody in the chats mentioned something. I know who you are. I know what you're talking about. And I thought maybe for a minute this might have been one of the cases he spoke about one time. Okay. But it's not. Actually, I don't think it is. Sorry for my little, my brain stopped right there for a moment. So Amy, like I said, was an emergency room nurse there in the county. So their home farm had 2 large hog sheds, multiple outbuildings, and more property. Each of the hog sheds were approximately 100 yards long. I'll throw up some pictures here in a minute. The family was kind of trucking along. They seemed fine. But then in 2013, Amy began having an affair. So ultimately, Todd finds out about this. They choose not to divorce. And then you're going to learn that there are things worse, in fact, than divorce. So they decide to stick with it. But for their family, this kind of meant something a little different. Todd made Amy quit her job as a nurse. From now on, she was going to stay home and work raising the kids and helping on the farm, which could be fine. But we're going to hear Amy's account to her friends as the years go on about what that really kind of looked like. So around this time, Amy was noted to tell friends that she really had no other choice, that if she were to stay in the marriage or actually not fear for her safety, she was going to go on and quit her job and stay home. She said that she wanted a divorce, but she was afraid, quote, that Todd would kill her if she left home. Todd even told Amy's stepmother, I'm not going to lose my farm and everything I've worked for. You're going to find a consistent theme on his concern for losing his farm. So not much really kind of happens the next few years. They are laying low, working the farm, doing their thing. So finally in 2018, about 5 years after she quit her job, the difficulties arise. So Amy begins a second affair in June of that year, of 2018. This time it was with a man named Jerry Frazier. So Jerry actually was the guy who was like the farmhand overseeing the hog portion of the farm. Let's see here. So Todd became suspicious of Amy and Jerry after he received a phone bill and noted like significant amounts of communication between Amy and Jerry. So Todd confronted Jerry Frazier. He just kind of went straight to the source, and Jerry denied the affair. Jerry will later say that he was concerned for his own safety had he admitted it. But Todd was unsure whether or not he was telling the truth. So Todd actually contacted Jerry's wife. See, Jerry was also married. So he goes to Jerry's wife and shared his suspicions with her. And she actually had what I consider a bit of a surprising response. She thought Todd was crazy. She told him, absolutely not. There's no way they're having an affair. And I just feel like if you get just a cold call like that, even if you're in the most trusting relationship, you're going to say, like, at least tell me, what are you talking about? Where did you come to this suspicion? But immediately she was like, no, you're crazy. There's no way that's happening. So evidently Todd calls both Jerry and his wife back over the next couple of days and apologized to both of them. But in the meantime, he had also shared suspicions with Amy's stepmom, and he questioned their mutual friend, who was Amy's former coworker, about Amy's behavior. He said that she was acting like she did the first time she was having an affair. So he's starting to get kind of nervous. But at one point, their friend did suggest that maybe they should just split off, that they would be better off not together. And Todd responded to her, I've worked for this farm since I was 11. I will not be giving it up. So, like I said, this is a consistent theme. So when their mutual friend learned of the affair from Amy, she did tell Amy, like, hey, you're putting yourself in a very precarious situation here. She said, Todd's going to kill you. She said, Todd is the person you just don't mess with. This is what their mutual friend is telling Amy. So their friend was at a work event and actually had caught on to rumors of Amy's affair and told Amy about these rumors. And this upset Amy greatly. She started crying. She then, not crying because she's devastated over her marriage. But when she starts crying that there were like rumors of her affair, she tells her friend exactly where she could look for her body should she go missing. We hear of these things happening a lot. And unfortunately, ultimately, that is the end that we come to whenever we hear women saying these kinds of things. If you ever find that you have to tell your friends where to find you if something happens to you, I hope that you already have a plan in place to be exiting the situation you're in. So Amy calls another former coworker of hers to see if this person had heard, any rumors. If you have, please stop this buzz around town. She explained several times that Todd will kill her if he finds out. And she explained that her oldest child, Tristan, he is sometimes called TM, Tristan told Amy, if dad finds out you're having an affair, he'll kill you. Now, we run into a situation with Tristan, which we'll talk about a little bit more later, which is probably the bane of my existence. And it's when parents insert children into their marital issues. So if a conversation that Tristan wants to have with his mom is that he hates that she did what she did and it hurts his feelings and he wants them to stay together, that's a conversation for them. But you'll find that Todd is inserting Tristan into it all during the time. By July, Amy had talked to their mutual friend about leaving Todd, and Amy was to the point, per her friend, she's saying that Amy felt like she was strong enough finally to leave on her own. She said it was not so much that she would leave for Jerry, but she was just going to leave on her own. She was, like I said, looking for an exit strategy. And I do find too, not to get off in a rabbit hole here, but we talk about sadly with like the S word, unaliving. I caught myself. When people have like a really heavy depression and families and friends will say they haven't been out of the bed, they haven't showered, they haven't cleaned their home, they've been down, but then they like all of a sudden have a day or two where they're like full of life and things look better. Or we find that at end of life, as someone is approaching death, they could be kind of catatonic, not moving, not eating, sleeping all the time. And right before death, just ask a nurse, right? Like you'll see someone start to move and all these things, and family members get excited, and that's actually the sign of the last hours even. And I find that we've talked about it, but in a lot of these cases, either with domestic violence, I'm not saying that's what's happening here, control issues, or somewhere where someone is afraid to leave, they start making that plan to leave. And ultimately, a lot of times, unfortunately, that's when we find the bad thing happens. Would you say?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, Amy explained to another friend of hers that Todd did not want to divorce because he would lose half of everything and he considered it socially unacceptable. She also explained to a friend that she was scared of Todd, and if he found out about wanting a divorce or an affair, he would kill her. So we have a common theme. And so either Amy was lying through her teeth the whole time, telling multiple friends and family members all of these things, or not, because Todd's going to paint a very different picture. And unfortunately, all we have is her friends to speak for Amy and then what Todd has to say. So Amy's grandmother passed away in August of 2018. And by then, Amy's brother will say that Amy was planning to divorce Todd, and she actually was expecting Todd to fully flip out for Amy. But Amy was worried that her son Tristan would be angry with her for leaving Todd. Now, earlier in the show, I told you that they had 3 children not too long after getting married, and Tristan was their oldest of the 3. So I won't even be referencing the other 2. They were much younger. There's not really much to say about them. But just know that Tristan was the oldest of the 3 children, and he was around 13 years old at this time. So in October, Amy's uncle actually suffered a brain bleed. So Amy was away from Todd for a while, pretty often to kind of help with her uncle's care. And evidently Todd was starting to get a little irritable about this. He didn't like her being gone. He had hogs going out. The harvest was coming in. He had to care for the kids at home. And that month, fun little note, Todd found what they call a corn rake in the yard and put it in the red shed. So like I told you, there were multiple outbuildings on the property. Let me go on and show you, as always, any photos that we talk about when you're listening to this show, we're going to put on the Andrea Blade Instagram page, so you'll be able to find those there. So you'll hear me reference the red shed often. Let's see here.
You said he found it? I'm sorry, but you said he just found it?
Yeah, I mean, it belonged to them, but kind of like stumbled upon this.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, Maybe I don't. Does this one show the... Yeah, that's one of the buildings there. That's the red shed there. And you'll see, if you look, you see a couple of really big silos, like grain silos, and then this red shed. So we put it there. All right. So Amy had an outpatient medical procedure on November 6th. We find out later that she had what's called an ablation. She had pretty significant endometriosis, which caused her to have really heavy menstrual cycles and just kind of extra pain. And so this is just a procedure. Like I said, it's outpatient. You go in, you get some stuff kind of like burned off, cut out, whatever, and you go back home. And eventually, once you heal, things should be better, like in terms of female care. So she had that procedure done on November 6th. And then when she left upon discharge, she had a 10-pound lifting restriction for a few days. So she rested at home, and a friend texted at some point on the morning of November 10th, so 4 days later, to see how she was doing. Amy responded, "Thanks, okay. Things still very tense around here. Just not sure of anything anymore." So this will be one of the last texts that Amy ever sends out. So that same day, on November 10th of 2010, 4 days after her procedure, Tristan and Todd had left home to go check on some hogs off-site that they were going to pick up. They were expecting a new litter of hogs. So they returned to the farmhouse for breakfast that Amy had cooked. After breakfast, Tristan and Todd went out to what they considered the North Hog Barn on the farm. Again, that's as big as a football field, okay? So it's about 100 yards long. At 10:12 in the morning, Amy texted Jerry Frazier. So that's the one that the guy she was in an affair with, remember? And he was also a farm hand in charge of the hog farm. And her text said, quote, "Do you know what I'm doing today? Cleaning fucking light fixtures in the barn. WTF." A few minutes after that, Tristan and Todd went to the North Hog Barn, and Amy came out to join them. They were preparing the barn, like I said, for the incoming litter of hogs. So Todd was arranging some feeders in the pens, and Tristan was bringing heaters in from a storage area. So they're all just kind of milling about, doing their individual jobs. And Amy, like she said in her text that she was not happy about, was cleaning the light fixtures. So she was cleaning these by standing on a 5-gallon bucket, in order to reach, right? So Tristan and Todd noticed, they say later that they both noticed that she seemed a bit dizzy, a bit unsteady. And they both asked if she was all right. But she continued to work until she appeared more unsteady. And Tristan and Todd both suggested that maybe she stopped doing that portion of the job. Again, she had just had that procedure 4 days before. And that can kind of keep you a little bit out of commission for quite a few days. So at some point, Todd said that maybe she should just go on and get this pet carrier from the red shed. That was about 30 yards from in front of the hog barn that they were in. Okay, so it's a decent little walk, about 30 yards away. So this pet carrier weighed about 15 pounds. So he didn't say, "Hey, go scoot it out to in front of the shed. I'll get it later," whatever. He says, "Hey, go get that for me." Now, I've got a picture somewhere, but it's just what you think. If you picture like a dog crate or something, the kind that's it looks like an igloo, it's like a plastic on the top and sides, and then the caged front that you would squeeze the little latch and open up. And so those aren't, significantly heavy, but if you have a 10-pound weight restriction, she probably shouldn't be grabbing it. Plus, it's just kind of awkward sizing and whatever for her to be grabbing. So he says for her to go get that and put it in front of the hog barn. Or just leave it out in the yard for them. So Tristan and Todd continued to work in the hog barn for about an hour and a half after that. So after Amy left, at some point, we don't have a lot of timestamps on this stuff, Tristan took over cleaning the light fixtures, and he was just kind of doing whatever his dad instructed him to do. So at some point, they get some water in the little office area of the hog shed. And so what you'll hear later is that Todd will say he instructed Tristan to just, go get yourself some water. Go get yourself some water. Go inside. There are also differing accounts as to whether or not Tristan went back into the home to get water, or if he stayed there in the hog shed during that time. So initially, and this is very important, Tristan told investigators that he was with Todd the whole time. And actually, he maintains this for a while. So for the initial parts of this investigation that's about to follow, you'll find there's no way Todd is implicated in anything because he was with Tristan the whole time. His 13-year-old son is his alibi, and it's airtight. But then, as at the deposition, Tristan said he was out of Todd's sight for probably about 1 minute and 40 seconds. This is a 13-year-old saying, this very specific time. He later clarifies with the state and defense counsel that his estimate was inaccurate and that he couldn't really tell you how long Todd, his father, was out of his sight. So Tristan went to the red shed at his father's urging. So after a little while, for quite some time, remember, Todd says to Tristan, will you go check and see what's up with that pet carrier? Because Todd had looked out from where he was in the hog shed and didn't see it sitting outside as he had instructed Amy to put it, right outside of the red shed. So he tells Tristan, hey, go check on, see what your mom's doing. Why didn't she obey me? That's not what he said, but that's what it sounds like. And he's saying, I can't, whatever, it's not out there. We're going to find out that maybe this issuance to Tristan had a bit of a different meaning behind it. But either way, he tells him to go look for that pet carrier because he's really going to need that. So Tristan goes into the red shed and he finds Amy. There she is, kind of on hands and knees, face down onto the ground. And she's got what is called a corn rake sticking out of her back. Now, if you're not familiar with what a corn rake is, it's very much like a pitchfork. Think a long handle with long tongs on it, or prongs, I should say. But it's curved more to kind of scoop up the corn. So I'm going to show you a picture here. And that is the corn rake. So you're going to hear Todd call it a fork. You're going to hear a rake, corn rake, pitchfork. It's all of those things. But that's what that instrument looks like. You can see here it's got some stains on it. It's got some blood on it. It's a little rusty. But that's what this tool in question is. So when poor Tristan at 13 years old finds his mother, she's lying face down with this stuck in her back. So he yells for Todd. Amy was unresponsive at the time, but Tristan does tell his dad that his mom has a pulse. So evidently she was shallow breathing and did have a bit of a pulse at the time. So Todd runs over and tells Tristan to go get the truck and bring it over. Not a big deal, right? He's 13 years old, the oldest of three on this farm that he was raised on. So just not a big deal that he went and got this truck. So he goes and gets the truck. He brings it over. And as Tristan is pulling the truck back over, he sees his dad take the corn rake and pull it out of his mom's back. Todd will say later that there was a reason he did that, but either way, Todd goes on and puts Amy on Tristan's lap in the truck and they set off for the hospital. So Amy's head is lying on her son's lap. She is bleeding profusely, as you can imagine, because he just took the impaling instrument out. Mm-hmm. He says later he pulled it out because it kept getting caught on fertilizer containers in the shed. That when he continued to try to move her, the handle was getting caught. We can talk about it later. I'm having a hard time with that one. Okay. Probably one of my bigger issues is him removing that. Mm-hmm. Is it not 101, you guys? I've listened to something even just earlier when they say, well, I think the first instinct is to remove what you see as impaling someone. Maybe something small and maybe in a different part of the body or something. I think that at this point, we've all heard so many times, it's your instinct to leave it in.
Yeah. My dad, when I was a kid, and I got a few years on me. He always said that. No matter what gets stuck in you, a knife, whatever, leave it in there. Because once you pull it out, you're going to start bleeding out. This is a man who stuck a oyster shucker right through the middle of his hand, maybe after drinking a 12-pack or 2 of Schlitz. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I was about 4 when I saw it. But you don't pull it out. You just leave it in.
Yeah, of course. And that's what I'm trying to say. You don't have to be a genius to know this. But keep in mind, even if, you may be listening to this and say you've never heard that, Todd was a farmhand. He had worked a farm his whole life around giant farm equipment. I read you statistics on the hazards of farming early on in the show. He was brought up with brothers who farm, a family whose parents farmed. So I can assure you that Todd knew that if something gets impaled, be it in an animal or yourself, you don't remove it unless you're prepared to deal with whatever it is, that the aftermath is going to be. So he knew that. And then his wife is a former emergency room nurse. So I'm sure that they've had conversations about things they've seen. And take it one step further, an emergency room nurse in a farming community. Like, so, you know, they know these things. So there's no indication as to why he would, I think you're calling 911 and finding a hacksaw to saw off the handle before you're pulling it out of her body. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
But either way, that's what he does. So he starts driving to the hospital rather than calling 911 initially. This I don't fault him for. Or I can see him calling as he's driving away. If you're in a particularly rural area, however far from, you know, the local hospital or facility that's going to be able to treat her, I can see driving first as you're calling and getting ahead on it. I would probably do the same thing there. But while he's driving, he calls 911, and this will be at 12:01 p.m. And he says, do you even see my... Okay, you talk to them about any of this right now.
Well, I can say that it's not absolutely crazy for someone to be en route to the hospital, call 911, and 911 coordinate an ambulance to actually catch them en route, especially known life-threatening bullet holes, stuff like that. So if you know you got some puncture wounds, possibly already bleeding out, yeah, you can call on the way. I mean, if you think about it, not everybody thinks about it that way. They may think, hey, I'll just call and help will come to me.
Right. So this call kind of goes on and off for about 6 or 7 minutes. I'm just going to play you 1 minute and 40 seconds of it. And it, you know, he's kind of breathing heavy, kind of yelling. It's a little grainy. You'll be able to hear what's important. But it's just like a little loud and grainy. So know that going in. Well, maybe not. So sorry, you guys. Give me a moment. Okay, you're free to speak on anything you want to.
Well, I would say at this point, you know, people are already, you know, putting comments in about.
Delaware County 911, what's the address of your emergency room? Well, hello? I'm on the road. Okay, what's going on? My wife, she's not responsive. I don't know if she's hurt. I don't know if she's halfway out the door. I took my phone over to check on her. Yelled at me, and she looks gone. Okay. We'll get an ambulance for in just a second. I'm headed there. I grabbed her and I threw her in the truck. Okay, you're headed to the hospital and she's in your vehicle? Yes. There's no car. Can you pull over? I can. Okay, how about you pull over? You can't do anything. She's just, there's nothing. Okay, what is your name, sir? Todd Mullis. You feel anything? Amy. Okay, sir, what happened that she's not conscious or breathing? She fell on a fork. I had to get a fork on her. And the old fork's getting in front of her, and then she was halfway out of the barn. Like, she's calling to get out, and took and yelled, and I ran over there, and she's in. She's not responding. Okay. Come on. Sir, do you feel comfortable doing CPR? I'll try anything. Is she flat on the, are you able to get her flat across maybe the seat? Yeah, 1, 2. 1, 2. Go on. Come on, respond. She's cold. Come on.
All right. So you heard him there. I'm trying to say, there we go. You heard him there. Parts of that call were more believable than some that we've heard. And parts were interesting. So one thing we always note on 911 calls is that obviously we know everyone deals with shock and trauma and, you know, these emergencies very differently. Your voice can do weird things. I get it. That's fine. But it's more of sometimes what you say or what you don't say. And his initial thing is, we were at the barns. My son was doing this. He goes to find his mom, right? So we talk about that a lot when someone sets up what happened before they called instead of, I found my wife with a pitchfork in her back. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yeah. And for anybody, just feel free to listen to just random 911 calls on YouTube videos that you know are legit, and you start to see those patterns. But it's true. Like, think about it right now. If you're listening to a show and somebody beside you is in a life-threatening injury and you call 911.
I was listening to Nightshift with Andrea Upley and her co-host Brian Sanders. It was a case I'd never heard before.
You raise a good point.
And then I look over and my so-and-so is slumped over in the chair.
Yeah. You don't do that.
You do that. If you call 911, please plug us first, actually. And then get to the emergency at hand.
That's a good point. You're like, listen to them live Tuesday at 8:48 p.m. Eastern.
Anytime that afternoon, night.
But that is a great point to bring up, is the staging like that, the setting, the scene.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just, some people just wait and answer the questions. Sometimes the EMS or dispatch will say, are they breathing? Are they bleeding? They'll start going into a series of questions.
Right.
And most people just answer them, or they start to get a little frantic or nervous the farther out they are from the hospital.
Yeah, and that makes sense, right? But when he's setting that scene of and I don't want to color it like that for you right now. I've listened to it so many times, that's what it's beginning to sound like. And you'll hear him say, respond, Amy. And I think it's honestly just his inflection in voice and being from a different part of the country than me, but it sounds like he's annoyed when he says, Amy, like, and that could just be a difference in accent or whatever. Right. But he says, she fell on a fork. I got to get this fork. I had to pull a fork out of her. We're just doing an odd amount of cases where these women are just falling on these objects that are impaling them, sometimes more than once. You saw the object in question, right? So it's got these long prongs, and we're going to explain the extent of her injuries here in a moment. But consider the fact that he said she fell on it when you hear what it was like. And I can promise you that for him to pull that out of her body, he's going to have to put his foot on her back and pull with the force to get that out of her.
Which, and my notes may be wrong. I was trying to jot something down when you were talking. Did the son, Tristan, was it that he found her?
He was
with it sticking out of her back.
Tristan was told to go to get that pet carrier because, your lazy mother didn't get it back to me in time. Go get that for me. Yeah. We often find, too, that people need someone else to find a body.
True. And when you try to recreate that, if there is a way that you can fall on that device and get those same injuries. Well, I say same. We haven't gotten that far into detail. I'm saying there's a way
to be stuck or impaled. Sure.
Yes. But what would it be? What would it look like?
It would look like somebody pushed you down and then pushed your body on top of it, and somebody else is standing on the handle of it so that doesn't flop up like it does in a cartoon.
Or if it's on the ground, prongs up, and you have an aneurysm or you pass out and you fall with your full weight, even if it impales you, right? If you fall straight back like that, right? On top of it, and the prongs stick in you somewhat.
Okay.
And you're dead, or you're at least so out of it you can't move, how am I going to be found? I'm going to be found on my back, more than likely face up, right?
Yep.
I'm not going to be found on my back. But I think we have to add
the fact that even if that happened, even if you were to be of a heavier weight and you're falling from, maybe you're up on a stool, so you're from an elevated height and you fall back, so it's given just enough velocity for it actually to puncture you, not just puncture, but fully impale you like that. All four of those prongs, you still have to have something lying on the end of the handle to hold that weight. Otherwise, it's going to flop up. And I made a joke about a cartoon, but all the Bugs Bunny, they step on the end of a rake and the handle bops up and hits them in the head. If you fall on it, that's still going to happen unless maybe there's some pressure on the end of the handle holding that down. Or let's say it's on a workbench. That was one of the theories I think they worked a bit in court. Like if it was like on a workbench or something and she was up on a step stool and falls and tries to pull for this pet carrier that she was getting, and she pulls and it's like tight and she stumbles back onto it somehow, like something like that. We'll see either way though. As Brian noted, remember how she was found, and it was not on her back. It was not leaning against something with it stuck to her. It was almost on hands and knees, but not fully. like she wasn't fully upright on hands and knees, but wasn't fully, flat on the ground either. Mm-hmm. But either way, her back was up and it was in her back. So she's turned over from the point of it being impaled inside her. Okay. So you heard some of the 911 calls. So he gets pulled over and starts doing CPR. That's what the last thing we heard the dispatcher instruct him to do was. So that's what he starts doing. And Deputy Luke Thompson arrives on the scene and takes over CPR at this point. He asked Todd what happened, and Todd told him they found her with a corn rake in her back. An ambulance arrived on the scene. So did some bystanders. They actually knew the family. Some podcasts and sources I read just thought it was wild. Like, how would they know? Did they already get wind? No, it's because it's a rural farming community, and all of a sudden there's an ambulance, hauling it down the road, and it's not crazy that it's going to be somebody you know. Mm-hmm. So the bystanders who knew the family go in and take Tristan back with them. Tristan is blood soaked. His mother had been lying on his lap. They take him back with him to their house to kind of get a shower and honestly just to watch over the poor child who was in shock. And Todd goes on with another bystander and follows the ambulance onto the hospital. So Amy is pronounced dead pretty much immediately upon arrival to the hospital. The medical examiner completed kind of a cursory exam of her remains and discovered 6 puncture wounds to her back. What did we learn about this rake? Count those. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it has 4 prongs, not 6. Okay, so this was a very big detail initially. The medical examiner also observed injuries to Amy's chin, cheekbone, knees, and knuckles of each hand. The injury to her chin had both crush and scraping components to it, but there was no debris in the wound. So think about what that means. That doesn't mean that first of all, that would be an injury to interior, right? The front of her, whereas that's in the back of her. So, if that was in the front of her, you could say she fell, hit her chin on the ground, impaled herself on that, right? But that's not what happened because that was in her back. But the no debris portion to the wound on her chin indicates that she wasn't on the dusty concrete. Her chin didn't scrape down there. So how did she get this injury to her chin? Didn't have dirt and concrete bits and these kinds of things. Okay. Mm-hmm. Because Todd said that she fell on the corn rake, the medical examiner asks to see it because at this point, the medical examiner doesn't know what it looks like, this particular model. Mm-hmm. So when he asked to see it, he discovered that rake had the 4 tines, like I mentioned, right? So he questions now how it's going to create 6 puncture wounds with 1 impact. So if she falls, did she just get up and fall again? Mm-hmm. So he contacts the state forensic pathologist and requests now that she perform an autopsy on Amy's remains. This is looking less and less like an accident pretty quickly. And you will later hear that the medical examiner said soon, right off the rip, he was suspecting foul play, her injuries, because she didn't just have the injuries from the puncture wounds of the corn rake, right? So at this point, deputies still had not been at the house, right? Where her body was found there. So they go back and they get Tristan and go back to the family farm. And Tristan there shows them the red shed. He shows them where he found his mom. And so that night, the Delaware County Deputy Sheriff Travis Hemaseth, I always feel like I'm saying that wrong, was briefed on the case by Deputy Thompson. So they go out to the family farm to investigate. And 2 days later, Hemaseth attends the autopsy that the forensic pathologist was performing. So the pathologist determined that the damage to Amy's left hand could be defensive wounds consistent with a struggle and that she had blunt force trauma to her chin, cheek, and ear. When they examined the puncture wounds to her back, the pathologist discovers 2 different wound paths. So what that means is not only do we have extra puncture wounds, more so than just the 4 tines that are on the corn rake, they're going in different directions. So the 4 wounds from the corn rake are going in one direction. The 2 separate puncture wounds have a different wound path, meaning it was inserted at a different angle than the other time, whichever one came first, right? So the pathologist reasoned that Amy was impaled with the corn rake at least 2 times. Now, those last 2 puncture wounds could have been one impalement, or it could be 2 separate ones where it just kind of stabbed her with, the end of it. The pathologist found that the corn rake penetrated Amy's back pretty deeply. So it punctured her liver and her lung. And then another set of puncture wounds went in what's called the intercostal space. So between the ribs on her right side and kind of on her side and exited. So she actually had exit wounds from that one where the tines were coming out of the front of her to the point that it ruptured her breast implant on that right side. So those are kind of the different directions of the wounds. The pathologist classified her manner of death pretty immediately as homicide upon completing the autopsy. So part of the investigation, Deputy Hemoseth executed a search warrant and took all of Todd's electronics, including a camera system with 2 cameras that covered the property. So he had external cameras on property. That's great, right? So what can we find out from that, do you think? Well, we have no video from a camera that pointed at the red shed could be recovered anyway. So if there was one, there was not one to be recovered. And the video from the rest of the camera systems pointed at the yard between the buildings, and it spanned from, remember, her death took place on November 10th. The recordings took place from September 11th through October 29th, and then picked up again on November 11th, the day after she died. So there were what is that? 13, almost 2 weeks of no activity, yet it picks back up again the day after she died. The investigators could not determine if the missing video was deleted or if it just had not been on during that time. I'm going to go with it was probably turned off during that time is kind of my assumption here, and in case maybe anticipating something might happen. Now, Todd's take on this was the fact that, sometimes bunnies get over there, rabbits and cats and different things get over there and knock the cameras over and whatever. So, but the day after his wife dies by being impaled by a corn rake, he's going to go outside and make sure those cameras are working, I guess. Right? Because it starts working again the day after.
Okay.
So they also collect Todd's iPad that had been located in his tractor at the time. They discover that earlier in the year, so 5 or 6 months prior to Amy's death, the Google account Todd used on his iPad was used to search for things. First of all, I'm going to say it one more time. Just don't. Like, if something happens to me, don't look at my history, my search history. Just don't. It won't have anything to do with my death, I promise. But it's just going to look really weird, so don't do it. But they discovered that 5 or 6 months prior to Amy's death, the Google account that Todd used on his iPad was used to search for things like, quote, did ancient cultures kill adulterers?
Okay.
Thrill of the kill. Thrill of the hunt. Which, real quick, was that the name of the movie with the butcher baker from Alaska, the guy who sent women off and then he would hunt them? Do you remember that? We covered that case.
Yeah,
it was also a movie.
I don't remember the movie.
Yeah, I forgot what it's called. Either way.
Sorry.
He also searched for famous, quote, no thrill like that of hunting man. Then once you hunt man, you will always feel the thirst. Then what happens to cheaters in history? He also searched, I'm sure this one is of no importance. It's called, quote, killing unfaithful women. He searched what to do with large open chest wounds, and he searched organs in the body. So.
Not to sharpshoot you, but was that within a month or two?
5 to 6 months prior to her death.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yep. So following the autopsy, the deputies contact John Turbot. So this is a special agent with the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigations. Oh, IDCI. Don't we have some time trying to talk to you folks lately? We just should call this Nightshift, Iowa Division. It covers so many Iowa
pattern there.
Oh my gosh. Special Agent Turbot investigated Jerry Frazier. So that, remember, is the man that Amy was having the affair with, who worked on the farm. And they eliminate him as a suspect. So his phone actually pinged. He lived 45 minutes away, and his phone pinged at his home a few times during the time of what would be Amy's death. So at 10:45, 11:30, 12:45 was activity on his phone at his home 45 minutes away. They also eliminated Jerry's wife as a suspect because that's what some people have said. Like, what if it was her? What if she actually caught on to what Todd was talking about and, in a fit of rage comes and kills Amy? So Todd described his marriage to Amy as great. So if you listen to him in the interview room when they say, how are things going at home? How what's going on? And he said, we're I think his word was, we're solid. We're good. It's a happy marriage. Just that same morning, Amy was texting her friend saying, it's still so tense here. I just don't even know about anything anymore. And then we learned that she was also trying to maybe execute a plan to leave. So that does not a happy marriage make. Eventually, Special Agent Turbot confronted Todd and accused him of killing Amy. So this is while they're investigating him or interviewing him. So Todd responded by asking what evidence he had. He asked Turbot to tell him what the police knew. He did say, you want me to confess to something I didn't do. But the Special Agent Turbot will say that during the interview, Todd seemed very unemotional and very flat. He does. You can look it up. It's easy to find. Court TV actually covered this. This was a filmed court case. So you can find loads and loads of footage on Court TV throughout all the days of trial. But you'll see him in his interviews with investigators. And there's a lot of just kind of leaning forward, elbows on knees, kind of a flat affect, and just answering questions matter-of-factly. In February of 2019, so about 3 months after Amy's death, Todd was arrested for Amy's murder. They go on and proceed to a jury trial. He tried to get a judgment of acquittal, saying that the presentation of evidence did not present evidence that Todd committed the act that killed Amy. He just said they didn't have enough, essentially. So Todd, in an interesting turn of events, does testify as his own defense.
Okay.
Can that just always be can we just be like, you're guilty? I'm so, like, if you're gonna.
Oh, if you testify?
Yeah.
Hold on. If you testify, it means you are guilty?
I mean, it's just not often that you want any defense attorney or that a defense attorney is going to want to put their defendant on trial for particularly a husband when a murder is dead, right? When a wife is dead.
Yeah,
right?
Usually the strategy is don't put someone on the stand. I do know of cases in my background where people taken the stand and been found not guilty when they probably were pretty guilty.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. So either way, he tries to get it acquitted. Obviously, this doesn't work. And the jury did convict Todd of first-degree murder, and he motioned for a new trial. I think he recently came up trying to have a new appeal stating that his defense attorneys didn't allow him to call it an accident, because for the longest time, he kept maintaining that it was an accident, not that it was murder, that she accidentally fell. I guess he wanted to hang on that so that they're not investigating it as a murder trial, but that's how he wanted it presented. Like, not only did I not kill her, but it wasn't murder. If that's what you want, then take this to Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania and you might get that ruling, but I digress. So moving forward, let's see, I'm not going to read that. So keep in mind, this is also something to consider. There had been some snow. All right. There had been light snowfall the days leading up to Amy's death. So, well, what does that mean? What that means is that so Todd meets the ambulance, right? They take over CPR. She goes to the hospital. Detectives are asking him questions. Then they go get the kid, go back to the house, go back to the place of death, right? And when they get there, they see that there were footprints that went basically from the house to the hog sheds to the red shed, like to the various outbuildings. That all plays out. That makes sense. There were no footsteps from the front of the house. Like if you were to pull up to their house as a guest or as someone else, there were no tracks or footprints leading to the house. So it certainly obviously looked like an inside job from the get-go. Now, some theories, like I told you at the beginning, and if you're still hanging in there, thank you, and let us know now, because at the beginning I told you, there are Facebook pages, I was reading them up until today, that like one is like Justice for Todd Mullis. Like people really are hanging their hat on the fact that this man did not do this. Okay. Now, it's a bit polarizing because there are also people who for sure think he did it. And I'll tell you some of the theories people have had. So one of the first different ones that we haven't discussed is that some people think that this was different. That hormonal 13-year-old Tristan had already been upset with his mother. Todd had actually said that, quote, he and Tristan bonded over the affairs that Amy had. It made them closer together. And Todd had been grooming Tristan to take over the farm one day. We talk about, parental separation, at least alienation at worst. And I told you at the beginning, one of the things I can't stand more than almost anything on the planet is when an adult involves a child in, discrepancies in a marriage. And it sounds like that's what had been going on with Todd and Tristan. And so one of the thoughts, is that potentially Tristan does what his dad urged him to do, goes to check on this pet carrier, instead finds his mom either on the phone talking to Jerry, sending out a text, and in a fit of rage, flies off the handle, does whatever happens to her, and then his dad covers up for him. I'm not in that camp, but that is one that enough people talk about that I felt like it's worth mentioning. But I don't sit there. What do you think on that one?
Well, I would. I don't like theory land.
Mm-hmm.
I always like evidence.
I know.
Yeah. So if there was evidence on her phone,
but we don't have evidence of.
If there was evidence on her phone of her messaging
in that moment,
said, boyfriend or whatever.
She did at 10:12 a.m.
So something like that. That's what I'd be interested in knowing. Okay, there was one. Now, okay. Who would have been able to see it or that sort of thing.
Or Todd saw it, right?
Yeah.
Another thought was Jerry. So I told you his phone pinged at his home. He was quickly eliminated as a suspect. But he was the one she was having an affair with. And the only reason I think people will even point to him at all is because if you were to have spoken with Amy, the way she talked to some of her friends, she was really kind of falling for Jerry. I think she told one or two of her friends that she could even potentially see herself seriously engaged with him or potentially marrying him at some point in the future. And I think for Jerry, it was much more casual and that he actually didn't have any plans to leave his wife. He may be saying that now because he's still here on this earth and he's going to live with all of this. And Amy's no longer here. But evidently, if you go back and talk to him or talk to acquaintances, it seemed to be a much more casual affair for him. So the thought would be that, Todd's already let the cat out of the bag with his wife. Now she's texting him constantly and he wanted to offer. I don't agree with that one either. The thought would be that he left his phone at home because he knew better and came and did something. But there again, we don't have any outside tracks, anything like that. So I just don't, I'm not really in that camp.
You would also have to have someone sneaking in, right?
Well, their thought is that if you're him, the family's comings and goings. Like he worked on that farm. So you would know entrances, you would know where to be, you would know where to hide, you would know what their life looks like, their daily routine. So he would know that probably better than most. I don't think it would be hard for him to sneak in and get something done there. However, I don't know why, if he was going to kill her for the sake of saving his marriage, why would he do it when Todd and Tristan are there?
Yeah, so, with the highest probability.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. That's why I'm not in that camp either. But I'm just reading to you what.
Oh yeah, no. Oh, I know. I know.
And then Todd, of course, the husband, the convicted. Remember, he thought it would be unacceptable socially to get a divorce. He was controlling. He had always said that he was never going to split or sell his farm. So divorce was not an option because he would not be getting rid of it. He worked for, all those years for it. And like I told you at the beginning, he said that multiple times. We also know that actually in that meantime, from 2013 until 2018, when she had the first affair and then when she had that next affair, we say leave, don't keep having the affairs. But also, if you remember, a consistent theme was that she was terrified to leave. Because he had essentially already threatened her. She told her friends that they could find her body in a certain wooded area if she left him or if she went missing. So it sounds like she did have that fear. Her friends will say that they joked about the, quote, accepted friends list, meaning that during that 5-year span of time when she was made to quit her job and stay home, it was more than that. There was so much control. She couldn't go anywhere without him knowing where she went, timestamps, like grocery store, come back home. I want to see a receipt that that's where you went. These kinds of things, that she could only go certain places with certain people. So she couldn't even just pop off with any one of her girlfriends to go somewhere. They had to be on the list of approved people that he would allow her to go with. So Amy had told her friends that she planned to leave Todd after the harvest. Her friends say that she had quietly been looking for places to live and jobs to take. Friends referred to her instead of POW as POT, prisoner of Todd. And Amy was killed just after harvest. So.
Yeah, I think this is one of those where you get to the basics and you just recreate everything as it's stated to you from the son and Todd, because they're the only two, right, that ever saw her.
And we know that Todd is controlling and manipulative. So why wouldn't he tell the kid that we've been together this whole time? You don't want them to think that I did that. Like, so you just got to say we were together the whole time. He called her lazy. He called her all kinds of. So when I was saying those things earlier, I wasn't even just being silly, but like these are things that Todd had said about his wife. In the chats we've got, yeah, he is telling his 13-year-old about his mom's impaled. It's gross. It's really gross. So we got Brett in the chat saying, where's the farm in relation to nearest hospital? There aren't many, if any, full-time ambulance services in Delaware County. That's a good question. That's one thing I didn't really look up, particularly since this is a solved case, like details like that I didn't really get into. But I think that the route he was taking, unless you were joking, was the direct route, only because that was not mentioned that he was like kind of out of his way or doing something weird there. But either way, I do find it odd that, again, I can see myself, and I know I'm a nurse, but even aside from that, I can see myself grabbing somebody and hopping in the car to start going and calling 911 as I go. I can for sure see that happening all day long.
Yeah.
I don't see myself pulling the impaling object out of someone, not just like one little, like 4 prongs through an entire back, into the chest. And then throwing her onto my son's lap, first of all.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever. I know we're armchair quarterback in this one, but and then getting on the road and then calling 911. I mean, you're having your son. I mean, he went to get the truck. He can also be calling 911, right? Like he's delegating for him to get the truck. So it's not that he's completely lost his wits. Yeah.
Yeah, I just think if you recreate how it's even possible to fall on that tool in that environment,
twice,
see what it's like. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I think that's.
I know of a guy who had a pistol. It was like, I want to say, a 6-shot revolver with an external hammer, right?
Pistols.
Yep. Like a cowboy gun, right? And he had it inside of a little zip-up soft case. And he had it in his car. And I think I got the facts right. This is like a long, long time ago. But he picks the gun up, fully loaded, in the case, and it goes off. Because it was, if I remember right, one of those like Taurus Judge or whatever. I think it was loaded with a 410 shotgun rounds. And so it had recoil. It kicks out of his hand. He picks it back up. It goes off again. And nobody really fully believed him because of that. But what we figured out was that the recoil, because it was like a cock the hammer back and put it in single action mode. Point of the story, long story, is injuries can happen with tools falling on them, whatever, but you got to be able to recreate it for it to actually happen.
Yeah, I don't think you're getting impaled to the point that it went through between her ribs, punctured a breast implant. We're going to pull that back out and then like, whoopsie daisy, I'm falling back on it. And now all 4 times are through my back and now punctured my liver and my lung. Yeah. So I don't think that's how that happened. That's crazy.
It doesn't seem that way, does it?
Exactly. Man. Well, that's that case. It's a pretty straightforward one, actually, especially when you get into again, like the Google search history, it's whatever. Anybody could have done that. Other people had the password to get into it. You can't say he definitively was the one looking these things up, but it just adds to it. A lot of it's circumstantial. I know that. You've got the friends that say what they said, but there are varying friends throughout different friends groups that are saying these things about the relationship. And then you have that paired with him telling the detectives that everything was great. It was peachy. In fact, he didn't even tell them about the 2018 affair with the farmhand. When they finally dug deep, he finally said, "Oh, yeah, she had an affair back in 2013. Like, we're good. We're actually really good. We've gone to therapy. We're solid." He didn't say, "Oh, yeah, and she also currently has got somebody." So it's interesting. I do think it's interesting that the cameras weren't working. Again, that could just be a weird technological thing, but it's just a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, you just start making.
There's just a lot
notes,
of things. And I think the damning evidence too is the footprints in the snow, or the lack of footprints, leading up to the house, which really shows that something happened within there.
Yeah.
Let's see here. I'm reading your comments, guys. So I don't see pulling over and waiting for an ambulance to show up when most people would know, where the hospital is located and be there. Well, I agree. Now, the dispatcher did ask him to pull over, so that was on her. She kind of, she wasn't bad. She was a bit slow to not a quick talker, so she said, well, would you pull over? Could you do you think you would try CPR? Like, it was kind of like that. Yes. So this also says, hey Falk, it says, was there any discrepancy of the additional wounds not matching the fork, like she was stabbed and the fork was an afterthought to cover up the stabbing? No, as far as I can tell, they matched up precisely with the tines of the fork. And they were just in a different location. And again, like I said, like in a different pattern, right? A different wound pattern. So they were inserted in a different direction. So my theory is that the chin, if she had knuckle injuries on both hands, particularly left hand, I don't know if she was left-handed or not, that the medical examiner and then the forensic pathologist both deemed to be what they considered defensive wounds, that she'd been punching somebody. She was in a struggle. I don't know if he had wounds on his face or body. None of this is noted there. So either way, between that, she had her cheekbone was damaged because they considered it to be blunt force trauma to her cheekbone. And then her chin had that abrasion that was like a crush, scrape injury or whatever. It looked like, I think that kid went to get water or whatever he went to do. Mind you, the other two children were in the house. So this whole time, the young two children were in the house. And I think he went out there. I don't know if she was on a text right that minute or what spurred this to happen. But when he goes in that shed, they're in small kind of close quarters. It looks bigger on the outside. When you go inside, the aisles are really small. It is kind of narrow and, full of equipment. So I think for whatever reason, they got in a tussle right that minute. And then he just picks that up and he goes at her. And it's kind of like a kind of half gets her on the side there, the one that goes into the front interiorly. And then just she stumbles and then he gets the back one. That's what it most sounds like to me. Because then she wouldn't be getting those other injuries after that. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. When you were trying to describe the instrument, I've never seen anything like that. I've only seen pitchforks, like the longer prongs that you would stick like in hay.
If you're watching right now, can you tell? Do you know the difference between this and what we're calling just a traditional pitchfork, which is very similar, but they don't curve out like that. They're almost just slanted straight down from the handle with like the tiniest, like 20-degree slant at the ends of them.
Yeah, because remember, I was asking, did it get bent?
Yeah.
Like, I worked tobacco when I was a kid. When you're talking about how dangerous, when you're talking about how dangerous it is on a farm and stuff. Because I was trying to think, like, well, what instruments were used? Well, we used to use big spike racks that you jam through tobacco and then you put it in the barn.
Picture like at a restaurant, if you're like a cook and you take the order on those little spikes, but in a much bigger form with those big leaves.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's all we got.
I think it is.
Woo-wee. Do you have anything you want to add?
No. No, I have a new episode that'll come out tomorrow. And it'll be John G from Spear Talk podcast.
Oh, that's right. Was he in the chats tonight?
He was not. And I don't know. He's got a pretty hectic schedule.
I imagine.
Yeah. But he'll be on. He's going to talk about security work for the band Shinedown. He stays with them pretty much, I think, year round, doing their tour stuff, like security for tours. He's former Secret Service. He did Motley Crue concert stuff.
Okay.
But he also has a podcast on this same night, Tuesday. So I think we talked about last week, but he does it with Eric Bass.
Okay.
From Shinedown. He's actually the bass player.
That'll be fun.
Yes.
Well,
so
cool.
that one will drop tomorrow.
Very good.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have anything.
Yeah.
What? He's fascinating. Oh my gosh. All right, guys. I don't have anything either. We're gonna have some. I say it all the time. We're gonna have some new stuff in the store. I got to get you to do some things actually.
Okay.
I have questions, so I can do it. If you go to illicitapparel.dailythreads.com, find some stuff, support the show. I'd really appreciate it. And like I said, just follow us. You can follow me on Instagram at Andrea Uplate. You can follow Brian at Brian Sanders Disruptors on Instagram or The Disruptors. You can go to his website.
The Disruptors with Brian Sanders.
The Disruptors with Brian Sanders.
.coms.
.comsies. And and you can follow me on YouTube on the same one. Just if y'all don't mind, hit those like buttons and subscribes. If you haven't typed in an actual review on Apple or whatever, for either one of us, that'd be kind of cool. Just say whatever you want. They just want to see words in a box, okay? And all those little stars and all those little things.
5-star reviews on Spotify. 4 or 5. 5, I guess, is the max.
Yeah, it's 5.
Yeah.
You don't go to that golden 4-star restaurant. I think it's universally 5.
Oh, it is.
Right?
A 5-star restaurant? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 5-star knuckle sandwich.
Is that what you used to call it?
That's what some kid in the neighborhood used to say.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
It sounds old, but he thought it was pretty creative.
It's very creative. All right. Well, we do love you guys, and we appreciate you tuning in as always. Would you like to tell the good folks good night?
Oh, yeah. Good night, everybody. Good night, everybody.
All right, guys. Until next time, we will see y'all next Tuesday. Good night, y'all.